Aotearoa SOUNZ. E ngā reo, e ngā mana, raurangatira mā, tēnā koutou katoa. You are with the SOUNZ Podcast series for SOUNZ Centre for New Zealand Music, Aotearoa, ko Toni Huata ahau. Today I'm joined by Maisey Rika, Ngahiwi Apanui and Jerome Kavanagh to talk about the influence of Māori boarding schools on their music careers. A tēnā koutou katoa, ko tatu mai nei ringi te kaupapa mō te rā, mō tō tātou ui, kōrero rero, mō tō tātou wā i te kura, ngā kura noho Māori. Tainua ki tēnei wā, mō tō tātou mahi tito, mahi waiata, ki roto i te ao puoro, nō reira tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. He paku, karakia mo te tīmatatanga o tō tātou hui, ai o Māori ora ki te rangi, ai o Māori ora ki te whenua, ai o Māori ora kia tātou katoa. Turuturu o whiti whakamaua kia tēnā. Haumi e, hui e, tāi ki e, tēnā koutou. First of all, thank you everybody for coming together today, especially during this current lockdown. We know that continuing our mahi during a global pandemic is very challenging. So thank you all for joining our hui to speak about your music careers and contribution and influence that attending Māori boarding schools have had within your music. This podcast, Zoom, will be timeless in its broadcast. So, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. So, first of all, if we can just go around by saying ko wai koe, no hia koe, I'll start us off. I te taha o tōku kōka no Ngāti Kahungunu ki te Wairoa me rongo whakaata ngā iwi. I te taha o tōku pāpā no repara, wera, haina, areni ngā whenua o ōku tīpuna, ko au te kai hautu puoro Māori o Aotearoa SOUNZ. Ko Toni Huata tōku ingoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Ka huri ki a koe Ngahiwi.
Tēnā hoki koutou, tēnā tātou e hui ngā ipurangi nei i tēnei rā. Ko Ngahiwi Apanui tōku ingoa. Ko tētahi o kuiwi, ko te whānau Apanui, ko tētahi anō ko Ngāti Prau. Tatu atu ki rongo whakaata, rongo mai wahine, hoki whakate tokerau ki Ngāti Hine, ki Ngāti Whātua anō hoki, hoki pēnei mai ki te Aotearoa. Nā reira ko taku mahi nāne, ko te tumu whakarai, te tumu whakahaere, me ki te tumu whakahaere o te taurawhiri te reo Māori. Tēnā tātou katoa.
Tēnā koe Ngahiwi. Kia koe I nai nei e hoa, Maisey?
Ko tōku mei sotahi kia koe e te marae kura nā hauwi whakatūpira I tia tō tātou hui I tēnei rā, he mihi ana o tira kia koutou katoa o nā kai whakahaere o tēnei kaupapa, kei muri rā, kei muri nā ārai meki, kia kōrua hoki o ku whā kai pōro, kai waiata, e mihi aroha, e mihi mai oha ana kia koutou, tēnei o tātai kaupapa. Ko ai ai, ko putaua ki te maunga, ko ohine mataroa te awa, ko mātātua te waka, ko Ngāti awa, ko tūhoi, ko te aroa, ko te whānau Apanui, o ku iwi, kei kōneki, kei te kāinga mātou I tēnei wai, noho haumariwana I roto I tō tātou miru tonu, kei whakatāne, mātou ko tōku whānui e noho ana. Ko te kura o hato hoi, pa te kura I kurai nau mō ngā tau e rima. Nō reira, e mihi ana ki te kaupapa. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Maisey. Kia koe I nai nei, Jerome?
Nā mihi aroha kia koutou katoa huri rauni ta whare nei. Tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou aku whanaunga. Ko e tēnei mokopuna, ko rua hine te pai maunga, ko rangi tika I te awa, ko mako kōme, ko te kaina tūturu, ko kahungunu, te tangata, upoko iri, kono mōkai, hine manu Ngāti Paki, hauiti, o ko hapu, ko tērā te taho tōku whaia, and te taha tōku kraua no rereahu maniapoto. Ai, koera. Tautoko te kōrero, e mihi nunui kia koutou katoa. Te kaupapa nei, ko au he tamatawhito no Paura, hata Paura. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Jerome. Tēnā koe, tēnā koutou katoa. I would like to bring us back to our kaupapa of the day. We all attended Māori boarding schools of various hāhi, church denominations, where the experience would have contributed towards many leaders in the art, sport, government sectors. I went to Turakena Māori Girls College, and I certainly know that it played a part in my chosen career in the arts, starting with hairdressing, then music, theatre, producing, and now this role at SOUNZ. So kai a koe, Maisey, you featured in an album, E Hine, at the age of 14 years during your time at HuataGuests, which eventually won an award. A tuatahi, tell us about your experience in that project, boarding school life, and the influence it has had in your musical journey.
Well, all I remember is day one. I'm in front of Miss Kingi singing Pokari Kariana. The next thing I know, I'm at kapahaka practice. And after that, I'm in front of these people from Wellington, he Pākehā, all the way from Eastbourne. There's a recording studio over in Eastbourne. So, yeah, next thing I know, we're over there recording this album, E Hine. And I'll always remember that time because we were in studio all day. We had 3 or 4 days there, and there was 19 tracks. And we'll be in studio all day. I ate a lot of honey, and they gave me a lot of butter to eat to keep the korokoro, going. And then during the evening, there was heaps of kōrero about the People's Princess, Princess Diana and Mother Teresa. It was the same time, it was in August, so I'll never forget that time. She had passed that time. So we were doing this album, and then at Kura, of course, just so many memories. The sisterhood, we lived and did everything together. There was no phones, there was no internet at that time. So we just talked a lot. We hung out a lot in the gym, practicing kapahaka. We're at Kura, doing our mahi over there. It taught me how to study at HuataGuests and just to noho puku. And there was always a plan. I think the girls are still at Kura, even though it's been locked down, they're still at Kura. They had their plan. I always remember that Miss King always had us safe and secure, and there was always a plan. So that's what I remember, is that sisterhood, that strong bond between my friends and I, my sisters and I, and of course that massive respect for our great leader, Miss Kingi. At the time I didn't see it, but in hindsight, I definitely do see it. I mean, it started from day one, when we were across the road waiting to be pohiri'd on and feeling all awkward in our regulation shoes. And before we had the pohiri, Miss Kingi and then Irere came over, and they started taking our taonga. So girls had earrings in their noses, and so they ka wete ngā taonga. And I remember they took off our carvings, they took them off, and at first I was in shock, but ka tahuri mai, Miss Kingi kia mātou, ka mea kia mātou, ko koutou ngā tino taonga. So once you walk in those gates, it's all about, the taonga inside of you. So that was the first day. So it had a strong impact on my life. Yeah. Hope that answered your part.
Ai hoa, gee. So this was when you started at HuataGuests, they did this, not for the recording session?
No, not for the recording session. So just before we went on, we were called on, just before we had our pohiri. She came down and, had us tie our hair back and ka wite ngā taonga, and said before we walk in those gates, it's all about yous. And that's what she said. Ko koutou, ko koe te taonga. I'd never been referred to like that before, so that means a lot.
Yes, yes. And normally we refer to our taonga when they're, like, "Kua mate, eh?" But, I know what, where she was coming from in terms of like, you are the taonga, you are the precious gifts, you are the ones that are coming to experience and engage in your time here at Tauta Hohepa. And, she's still there, I understand too. Yeah, and the girls still don't do whakataitai, the kapahaka.
Yeah, no, we didn't do whakataitai at the Polyfest that was, I think, every second year. Yeah, we never competed. So that pressure was always off. But in saying that, we were always on the move, promoting the kura, went throughout the motu. I remember going to all the marae, Paki or Mahu, Tāngoi or Waimarama. We went, and that's where I would sing. But yeah, that very first day, the pohiri, and then of course I was in the dining room that same night because someone let slip. I think it was my auntie or some of the girls let slip that I love to sing. And so that very first night, in the dining room there, Miss King had me sing Pokare Karea, and I think I got through the first half of the first verse, and she just went like that, and she says, "I've heard enough. Be at practice in 45 minutes," and that was it. So yeah. It was actually quite hard to get in. My mum had to jump quite a few hoops because, one, I wasn't baptised or had any learning of the Catholic faith. You had to have straight A's. There was quite a few things, and the biggest one, of course, was the financial thing. So, it was just my mum raising me and my brother. So she worked like 3 jobs. But luckily, I was brought up whāngai to my whānau over in Te Whānau Apanui. They had a long history with the kura. So they put in the word, and I was able to go get in, and then did kapahaka and all that stuff, and the choir singing, and the hymns, wera kupu, those are beautiful melodies, and all the harmonies. I learned the appreciation for melody, and then of course in kapahaka practice, so I was in the chapel a lot singing the hymns, and kapahaka practice a lot, singing our Māori haka waiata. And then we had to noho puku a lot. There were many weekends, long weekends, where we whist all that kura, and we had to study. I mean, she always said, because you were wahine, you have to work twice as hard. Because you were Māori wahine, 3 times as hard. So, yeah, a lot of things that she instilled in us at a young age.
Wow, what a wonderful mentor, and particularly for yourself. I've heard many wonderful stories about Miss Kingi, and obviously it was very, very important to her to make sure that the girls were protected, that they were ensuring that through their education, through their choices, that they would receive the best in life. That's what I'm hearing from you, and I've heard many wonderful things about her. Well, kia ora mō tērā e hoa. Thank you so much for sharing that, because, we'll get more to our kōrero about the boarding school life as we move through our uiui. So ngā mihi kia koe.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Moving on to you, Jerome. You've attributed your journey in taonga puoro to your whānau, and in particular to your nan, which was for hauora and wellness. Can you tell us about how your boarding school experience contributed towards your chosen career path? Kai a koe te wā, Jerome.
Kia ora, Toni. Kia ora, whānau. Well, I came from like a farming background in the back blocks of Taihope, between Taihope and Omahu, there on the Ruahine Ranges. So I got booted off to Hatapaura when I was 11. I was one of those kids that got, for some reason, pushed up. And I was the littlest fella at Hatapaura. And again, I just similar kind of experience, I suppose, to Maisey Rika, going into the pohiri on the first day and just seeing all the boys, way at the pohiri and haka-asin, and that was quite, just memorable, being this like scared little fella. My koro was actually one of the first ones at that kura, and then my uncles went there, so I was the 3rd generation, and that sort of got drummed into me, like, oh, you're the 3rd generation, so you're going to Hatapaura. So I didn't really know what I was going into. And I was quite homesick because I was on the farm and just real whānau sort of stylies and with my nan and koro in them. And so, it was a bit of a shock, but a beautiful one. Taihope is quite a, rural, quite heavily colonised sort of place as well. So I loved, just sponging up all our Māori tanga and going in there. And obviously we had a lot of amazing influences in there. Papa Tipu, Morgan Simon and Kura Simon. And just, and the same too with going into chapel on the first morning, Monday morning, going into karakia and all the third forms, or the stinkers, we would be at the front, and then just feeling that ihio and that beautiful, those waiata blasting in through your back, and that was quite a hair-raising experience, and just to feel that power of the waiata, i te ata, so I really loved that part too. And of course I think we're a bit different to Hatahoe because we did have competitions, and they were pretty fierce, and it was quite full on regime of kapahaka practice every day, every morning, lunch, like just living and breathing it. And and then our tuakana there taught us, they were pretty fierce as well. So it was sort of like you were scared into greatness. I won't mention any names. No. But it was just that sort of culture, of just living and breathing it. And it was pretty amazing. Yeah. Very influential.
Oh, kia ora, Jerome. And so do you think that experience contributed towards your chosen career path?
Definitely did. I mean, just in terms of being immersed in waiata and haka and composition, and I mean, not so much taonga pūoro, but it sort of sets up the base for that. And of course, like Maisey was saying, we toured around the motu quite a lot as well, so that set me up in terms of what the realities and the rigor of touring with a kapa. And it was amazing, it helped me a lot for what I'm doing now. It's the basis really, or one of them anyway.
So true. I remember doing the tours too with Turakina, and we were Presbyterian, and Hotapaora was Catholic. Katorika, yes, like Hotahuhepa, and but there was a lot of us that were Anglican, but Presbyterian were very similar to Anglican faith. And I have to agree with both of you. The harmonic singing based upon the melodies, especially in the school assemblies and certainly in chapel, were just really, really special. And each house as well had their own style, and most houses had certain iwi in their house. This is for us at Turakina, would have been no doubt throughout all our Māori boarding schools, and that iwi style even coming into the singing, we noticed there too. Yeah, no, ka pai, and you're certainly a big kotiti haere, for sure, sharing your kaupapa e hoa.
Kia ora.
Kia ora e hoa. So I want to move it over to you, Ngahiwi. You attended Hototipene and then went to Victoria University, where you were part of their kaupapa Māori music band Aotearoa. And as many may be aware, Aotearoa released many waiata, including the very famous Maranga Ake Ai. Please tell us about your journey through higher education, including life at Hototipene and Victoria, and how those experiences contributed towards your compositions. Kei a koe te wā e hoa.
Kia ora, Toni, and kia ora tātou. It's nice to hear the recollections from Maisey and Jerome. I got to St. Stephen's, and it was probably the first time ever I wore shoes. I had grown up in Aotearoa, and I remember Mum, when I was about 7 or 8, buying me some butter bullets, and I hated them. I could barely wear the damn things, and so I got 100 metres down the road till I got out of sight of my mum, and then I took them off and put them in my bag, and then I lost them that day. But we were having to wear shoes all the time was something that my fat feet had to come to grips with, because they were flat as anything, from basically 13 years of running around with no shoes on. And I still have problems with them today. But the other thing that got me was the discipline and the way that it was rigorously enforced. And that took a lot of getting used to. And in fact, I was terrified at certain times in my life there at Tipene, because, it just seemed to me that people enjoyed, meting out their form of discipline at times. But the things that stuck out for me was the fact that they really encouraged us to do well academically. And I'd probably, and I knew my mother was a solo mum with 10 children. So I knew that I had this opportunity and I couldn't waste it. So I didn't focus on the rugby. I didn't focus on the sporting things. I focused on getting Schoolsy and Dewey and getting to university, and Tipene was my ticket to get there. The other thing that I kind of picked up along the way was harmony. And I had grown up listening to the old people harmonising on the marae and harmonising at tangi. And one of the songs that really used to pull at my heartstrings was Piko nei te matenga, ne? Piko nei te matenga, tau mai ko te pauri nui. And they would sing it in 4-part harmony. And I can remember it every tangi, and would bring tears to my eyes. And then getting to St. Stephen's, I can remember going to my first chapel service. And that was the other thing, was chapel every day except for Saturday when we prayed to a rugby ball. And then on Sunday we had 2 services. We had communion in the morning for an hour, and then another service at 7 o'clock at night. And this took quite a bit of getting used to for me, because, the only time I did karakia was when Mum would drag us along to church, or when we were on the marae. But the wonderful thing about being in these church services was that I got to sit in front of these 3 guys, and I can tell you who they are: Pat Matakuare, Ernest Sunley, and Joe Haruperika. And they used to sit together, 2 of them from Tūhoi, Pat and Joe. And Ernest, where was he from? I can't remember. But I sat there quite by accident one time, probably in the first week at Tipene, and these 3 guys started singing in 3-part harmony, and it blew me away. So I kept going back to sit in front of them, and had to try hard not to keep turning around to stare at them, because they were such beautiful singers. And in the senior concert party, you could hear them. You could hear the 3 of them, such beautiful, strong voices. And the sad thing about it was they left the following year. But what they did was they introduced my ears to 3-part harmony. And I could already play the guitar, taught myself to play the guitar, and I'd written songs and things since I was about 7. Want to be, pop star and all the rest of it. But I get to Tipene and I hear this harmony. And the one thing, though, was we were not allowed to take our music instruments, a bit like Maisey having her taonga taken off her. Well, we weren't allowed to take our guitars. And I left my guitar with one of my older brothers, and he broke it. And I wasn't very happy with him, because, it was the only guitar I'd ever owned. And Mum had spent a lot of money, which was about $30 or $40 back in the day, but that was a lot of money for one thing. And so as I went through Tipene, I was in the junior concert party. They didn't call it the kapahaka, called it the concert party, and then in the seniors. But what Tipene did, it introduced me to harmony. And the second thing that Tipene did, I suppose, was get me thinking about music, because I missed it so much. I missed playing my guitar. So that when I got out, I had a bit of a gap year. I didn't complete my 7th form year. And I got when I say I got a job at the railway station as a clerical assistant, it wasn't me who got it, it was my cousins, who after a couple of weeks had enough of my holiday and decided to get me a job interview for this office job. And there's not much you can say when the Pākehā man is shaking your hand and saying to you, the job is yours. And I said, yes. And so I ended up staying in Wellington quite by accident. I was supposed to go up to Auckland. But I got to really love Wellington, and I can remember my first pay. I went and bought a guitar, an electric guitar from Capital Music in Courtney Place. And then when I got my second pay, I went and put down a deposit on a small amp, and then started travelling over to meet a Pākehā mate of my cousins, who was a heavy metal guitarist. And really all he wanted was somebody to play rhythm while he went crazy on his guitar. And after a couple of months of this, I got a bit hoha, because I thought, because I couldn't play solos because I didn't know scales, I didn't know how chords were put together, all that type of thing. And so one day I thought, I'll flatter this guy and see what happens. And I said to him, hey, bro, you must be one of the best guitarists in Wellington, eh? And he went, you reckon? Yeah, man, better than those guys that are playing in the pubs. And so he showed me a blues scale, which I soon worked out was a minor scale used over a major chord. And then I worked out, the relationship between minor scales and major scales and things like that. And went back the next week and joined him going crazy on the guitar. And that was the thing I found with a lot of the young Māori that I've worked with in music. They pick things up really, really quickly, incredibly talented, And then I started at Vic the following year and met Joe Williams and Maru and Kararangiho and ones like that. And then really that's when I started to play in cover bands. Was probably my first year at university. And playing in cover bands was the closest thing that we had to a music course back in the day. But my real, my education started at Vic, not so much in the lecture theatre, but in the marae. As young people walking around, flexing our imaginary muscles. The thing that I really enjoyed about it was that no longer was I going to be disciplined, but the things about me that probably weren't celebrated at Tipene were celebrated at Victoria. For instance, being Māori, and I've always been the dark one. So there was all, hey, you're black this and hey, you're black that, and I think there was no harm meant by it, but it became too casually used in conversation. And it took me a little while to start kicking back against it. And so when somebody would call me a black this, I'd say, well, hey, you're fat. And they'd go, oh, no need to be like that. And I said, well, you started it, just to let people know that I wasn't going to take that anymore. And that I was proud of who I was. And I had a right to, to at least be treated civilly. And so those types of things started to come up for me. But Vic was very much a hugely empowering experience for me, because it taught me to stand up. It taught me to be proud of who I am. And it really taught me to appreciate my upbringing in a Māori-speaking family. And that was the thing I really, really loved, because at Tipene, I'd hidden away. I didn't want to whaikōrero, for instance. And I can remember my first week, lovely Māori teacher, Reuben Clark, came up to me and said, Ngahiwi, te ahua nei ko koe te mea mōhio o te third form ki te kōrero Māori. Mā hau te tū ki te kōrero. And I just ran. I think I got away with doing one whaikōrero at Tipene, because my belief was that role was primarily performed by our kaumātua, not by some 13 or 14-year-old. And even after I finished at university and went back home, I waited for the old people to say to me, Ngahiwi, haramai. And that happened at Mangahania Marae in about 1990. I didn't. There are a lot of young men I notice who think, okay, well, I know a karakia, or I can speak Māori reasonably well, therefore I have a right to stand to speak. And that was not my upbringing. My upbringing was when the old people say it's time, that's when you stand. And so, being at Vic was a hugely empowering experience. And then we started with Aotearoa, particularly driven by Joe's rendition of Maranga to me. And I couldn't believe that there was a law student at university that could sing like that with such power and passion, And I, every time he sung that in practice, he was brilliant, just hit every note. Then we go out and play, and he just get carried away, it was hard not to do, because those Aotearoa gigs were like rallies. They weren't like, like gigs. They were like rallies. People were, fists in the air and all sorts of things going on. And I was hopeful that was due to the message rather than the substances they were imbibing, because even then I didn't drink or smoke. I didn't see anything good for me in drinking or taking in any kind of substance. So it was an interesting time. But the thing that I would take away the most from tipene, I suppose, for me was it was at tipene I started thinking about music in te reo Māori and how much of a difference a band playing and singing about contemporary issues in te reo Māori would make. And that was part of what Aotearoa became as well. And also, a bit of a divergence down into Mōteatea, which was really something that I took from my youth, because when I was 7, I moved out to live with my grandfather so my mum could go to Rotorua and work on the telephone exchange, which allowed her to pay for my older brothers and sisters that went to Queen Vic and tipene as well. And my grandfather every night would put us to bed at 6 o'clock because he was an army man. And we'd be staring outside because the sun was still shining. And then he'd start to sing at about 8 o'clock his mōteatea and his war songs. And when I first heard it, it freaked me out. But after a week, I couldn't sleep without it. It was so comforting. And so I took that with me as I went through tipene and through Victoria as well. So those were the main things for me from tipene, was being introduced to harmony, understanding that there was something there for us in terms of te reo Māori in our music. But also, I think learning to stand up for myself was a big thing.
Wow. And that kaha would have come from your mum, no doubt?
Yeah, my mum was this tiny woman. She was I think she imagined she was 5'5", but mum was probably more 5'1", and I take her name. My father was a henare, the grandson of Tau Henare and Hera Sabritsky. But after they split, I think he spent a bit of time, actually 3 decades, pretending he had no children. And so my mother brought us up. She paid for us, and she was too proud to go to him to ask him for money for upbringing. That was just our mother. And so I had this tiny woman who was the rock in my life. And so when I went to tipene, as much as I was terrified at times, I wasn't going to leave because that would let her down. And I can remember when I graduated from Vic, she was there, and she was always going to be there. And look, after a year or so, the study became secondary to the music and all the other things that I was doing. And I remember going up to receive my certificate from, Sir Mason Jury and his wife, who was a kōhere from Te Araroa. And everybody was doing their haka, and it was, this is one of the most uplifting experiences you can have, is to have somebody doing a haka for you, a haka tautoko. It's just, it's amazing. And so I got my certificate, and I went back down, and there's my mum in tears. And as soon as I saw her in tears, I knew exactly why. And I said to myself, you lazy little you-know-what, you mucked around, at university. If you get the chance to study again, you honour your mother and you get an A, because that's what she deserves. And so when I did my master's later, 20 years later, that was it. There was no mucking around. I was going to, get the best mark I could get to honour her, and I dedicated that thesis to my mother and to my grandmother. But in saying that, I am a henare. That's who I am. I have the big head and the big ears to prove it, and and I'm very, very proud, because one of the most lovely things of recent years has been hooking back up with them and learning a lot about who I am and where that, because the Apanuis are quiet. They don't want to rock the boat. They're the type of people who put their heads down and just get the work done regardless. And I've benefited from that. My mother showed me that. Don't show off, Ngahiwi, just do the work. Let your work speak for itself. Whereas the henares, that's where the fight comes from. The family has a long established tradition of standing up for our people and for kaupapa Māori, and that's part of my DNA as well. But I've learned to use it in a different way. You can call out injustice without hitting somebody or insulting them. You can call out justice by kindly reminding people of what the facts are, about pointing out things that they mightn't have thought about before, and also with education. But a lot of that too, for me, has been whakawhanaungatanga and manakitanga, which for me is inclusion. I've heard people say those are relationship building, but for me it's inclusion. It's finding a reason to bring somebody into your whānau, into your whare. And in the case of Te Taurewhiri, it's about bringing people into our whare, te whare o te reo Māori, and making sure they're safe to be there. But, I'm proud of what my father has given me, but my mother is the architect of my life and my rock. And when I lost her in 2006, that took a lot of adjusting, a lot of getting used to. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I can see that a lot of us have received that backbone support from our mothers, from our koka, our whaia, and our kuia. And I know that for me also, I was a bit of a daddy's girl. My grandfather was my father. And so it was wonderful to also have a wonderful, I guess, role model that was my heart. That I suppose, like you, Jerome, your nanny was your heart. And but what I'm hearing is that our mothers definitely supported us, because it was my mother that supported me through boarding school too, and worked the 2 jobs, did all of that sort of groundwork to make sure, ensuring that we had a good education, or at least had that opportunity. Do you all think, and I want to go to you, Mace, what's the special thing about the boarding school experience? Of course, we've already been speaking about it, that you don't get if you're not a boarder.
Well, I noticed that quite a few, first, that kōrero was beautiful. Thank you so much. All the kōrero has been so beautiful to listen to. Yeah. But at Kura, I noticed that, especially in the 5th form and the 7th form, a lot of the boarders moved in. A lot of the day students moved into boarding. I think that was to do with, with bursary and school C, but also, to get that bond that we all had. We would do pretty much. We grew up in those turbulent adolescent years together, highs and the lows. We couldn't go anywhere. We had to deal with it right then and there. If there was any tuki happening, or if anyone was low, there were a few of my friends that lost whānau while we were at Kura, and they would come straight back to Kura because they missed us. We missed each other. All that kind of, all those sort of things were really important. Even now, that bond was so strong that the girls sometimes we ring each other up. Hey, are you all right? Hey, I had this dream, because that closed, that tino hononga. So we would live together, do everything together, go to church together, pray together, do haka together, do sports, do the kura, study, talk a lot. We talked a lot about our upbringing. And then, of course, we'd want to go and stay with each other during the holidays. That boarding life, living together, getting to know someone, really getting to know someone, they're the ones that I can really be myself with, even to this day. It doesn't matter what profile, what anything. When I'm with my sisters, it's all out the window. Really is. Our poor husbands, they can testify to that. So I think it's that. And even now, we could be apart for years and years. We could not see each other for years and years, and we see each other now, and it's just like we're back at Kura again. Unfortunately, we have lost a couple of our girls this year, and as sad and hurt and painful as that was, it was really beautiful and healing to see each other again. We were in Ongarue for one of our dear friends, and her brother went to Hatupora. So there was a lot of Hatupora songs there, and there was a lot of Hatuhohepa songs there, and it was such a beautiful, beautiful moment. So all of that. So it's just so much more than a kura, so much more than a kura. But a lot of our day students did come and move in. We're all very close still to this very day, even though we don't get to see each other much.
Tautoko. when the lockdown happened, you know, one of our mates started up a PM, and we were all just checking in with each other. And one was on her own because her tāne was somewhere else when it sort of all happened. So she's been all by herself, and, you know, and just all these like supporting each other. And this is like 30 years later. And, you know, I remember like all the times, and I think it's like being in the dorms too, like all the activities at school, but it's the dorms, it's all that kōrero. It's sort of like, I got a sore neck, and then maybe someone's got to do the miri, then someone's got the good hands and like, oh, can you do my neck? Then, you know, like it's sort of like, and sometimes staying up all night, bit kikino, but all those funny moments of a friendship, but growing up with each other. What about you, Jerome? How would you see that time for you?
Yeah, it was very close, you know, close as you're just in each other's pocket 24/7. We didn't actually have any day students, so we were just all in, you know, and just like you've both said, like in the dorms and out on the sports field in the class, you know, the whole thing was pretty intense, you know, like. Probably wouldn't have that kind of intensity of relationships with, it was really special time, you know. Of course, because we're forming, we're all rangatahi taiohi and coming up together like that. I think a lot of my form were quite looked after me quite a lot because as I mentioned, I was the little fella. And so there was sort of like a whole group of big brothers, you know. And my sort of experience after kura was a bit different because everyone went to teachers' college together, and then I sort of went off on my own journey really, and then it sort of started off my journey into, I went to Te Rangakura, which was another type of teaching, but more from iwi based in Wanganui. So my nan sort of advised me not to go to Massey, and she wanted me to. Our whānau decided that I'd go to Te Rangakura and do this kind of more kaupapa Māori based teacher training. So I did that, and that kind of like separated me off a little bit from the boys, which was fine because I still bump into them every now and then and still catch up with them. And but I sort of don't really have that, you know, real closeness anymore after that time. I feel like I went off on my own branch. But yeah, you know, it's beautiful. Like I still, as I mentioned, catch up with those ones every now and then. And not even just here in Aotearoa, I've been in like Dublin and saw some, you know, Hotapolda boys there one time, just randomly. And some of my travels bump into Polder boys. And of course, I'll catch up with them mostly at Tangihana, like Maisey was talking about it. It's quite a sad but really joyous occasion as well, because then we can come back together and sing together and do all those things that we were doing when we were at Hotapolda. For some reason, I never went back to Polder either until like last year. So it was over 20 years that I left and never went back. And it wasn't for any reasons really. It was just off on experiencing different parts of life. And then, so I went back last year to go back to the kura and work with one of my good friends, Hemi Heta, who's a psychologist. And we went back there to do some mahi with the boys around bullying, which was quite funny. To see that still going. You know, it was beautiful to go back. The kura just looked exactly the same to me. I was quite amazed, and it was really beautiful to go back and just to reminisce and remember, you know, that was a really beautiful, intensely beautiful time. Sometimes really hard, but overall it was, you know, really special. So I always remember our Polder brothers and loved them for that time that we had together. Yeah.
Oh, kia ora, Jerome. And, like just branching on what you were saying about the, like the touring, because you've traveled throughout the country, you've just done some mahi at Hotapara, which is awesome, especially in like obviously in the wellness, hauora kaupapa, but you've also done it through the world and, performing in festivals. And most recently, very proud to see you, by the way, with Drax Project and on stages like that, and to workshopping your wonderful oro atua with schools, different communities, also to winning a Grammy Award with Taonga Puoro. So, like if you could expand a little bit on what you're up to today, and you have sort of like already said that this was a bit of a flow-on effect from Hotapara, but yeah, expand on what you're up to today, what's up next for you?
Oh, ka pai, yeah. I'm not sure what's next, really. To see how the world goes. But one of my most favourite memories of being at Hotapara was our time with I mentioned Uncle Morv and Auntie Kura, and actually they took us over to the Sydney Opera House in the 90s. I think it was 1993 we went there. So it was a international choir festival that we had to put a mixtape in for. So Uncle Morv got us to sing a song in Māori, one in English and one in Welsh, and then we submitted our tape, because it was tapes back then, into this international choir festival that was held at the Sydney Opera House. Yeah, and so we got through, which was pretty amazing in itself, and then so that was us fundraising and doing all that stuff to go over there together. And being in that opera house was pretty amazing. And we had groups like the Vienna Boys Choir. We had some really major choirs from colleges from America, Germany, like all over the world, basically. And so, the difference between us was that we weren't just standing there with our arms folded. We had everything, and we had titi toria and tirako and patu and taiaha and poi, long poi, short poi, all that stuff was happening. So I think that was amazing to be kind of on that world stage together. And it wasn't that the group won, because it was sort of divided into gold, silver and bronze medals, and it was awarded to your tutor, in your group. But so I think we were one of 3 groups that got awarded a gold medal, and that was amazing. We got to perform on the main stage in the Opera House. Just as a 15, 16-year-old was quite amazing. And doing that together was just an awesome moment. So that kind of set me up for that sort of stuff too, I think Moana went to Hatohoepe. She was also quite influential in when I was living in London. One of her Taonga Puoro players had missed the plane, and she was going to be touring Russia. So Matua Brian Flintoff, he said, give her, email her and tell her that you play Puoro as well, because I wasn't really known at all. I was just doing Puoro myself, wasn't performing much with them. So I got in touch with her and then met up with her, and she said, if you want to come on tour, then you need to get up real early and go down to the Russian embassy and try and get yourself a visa. So that was me. I managed to get a visa, and I went on tour with her to Russia, and then every summer when she'd come back, I'd tour around with her. So she was another big influential person, just, connecting it to her being from Hohepa as well. And so that sort of became kind of somehow just flowed into being with these influential people who helped to shape me up and help me shape my own and develop my own kind of pathway. So I often talk about her being my trainer wheels, because we did a lot of big, massive festivals with big reggae festivals and things right throughout Germany and Austria and Switzerland and places like that. Where was I going with this kōrero? I think I'm just trying to really mihi to those different people that have helped me go into those places. And my journey's been sort of quite I've been at the right place at the right time, like quite, you know what I mean? I've been very lucky to be able to do the things like the Grammy stuff, and that was all just about connecting with those right people at the right time, and probably a lot of those skills that you learn when you're at kura in terms of relating to different people and different characters, and I think that's helped me out a lot, like and to be able to do those sort of different mahi. I guess in terms of what I'm up to now, it's more about sharing our taonga pūoro in a healing capacity, and that's sort of come about from having those experiences on stages and being like, you know, right from being like in a pub to you know, a big stage festival. And I sort of found with taonga pūoro, you get drowned out a lot. It's quite hard to get their reo across because some of them are quite quiet and soft, and so I wanted to be able to develop something that gave them, for pūoro, their own platform. Yes, where I'm not competing with, you know, with the bigger sounds of modern music, you know. So the Oro Atua came about from that, and my vision was to really tour around marae. That's what I wanted the venue to be. And you know, I've been lucky to do some really big venues, Carnegie Hall and you know, Sydney Opera House, separately from that time at Hatapolder, and you know, really big spaces and places and arenas, and yeah, but you know, like the marae is like, for me, that's the ultimate. And I guess sharing around you know, touring around schools a lot in Aotearoa, that's another place, because we're with the kids, and usually most school halls are made out of like native timber, so there's that sort of stuff, those you know, those rako vibrating with the pūoro. Those are the amazing spaces for taonga pūoro. And then of course you can't really beat outside either, so it's a little bit different, because there's different kind of wero in there in terms of sound and sound quality and what type of equipment you're using and all that sort of stuff. So I'm still learning it and still journeying through it. And and I mean, even the online space, that's another place, you know, we can take it to. So yeah, just developing and trying to evolve it so that it has continued life, because I guess my worst kind of nightmare would be that our kids don't pick those pūoro up, and then it's like all over, you know. So that's my kind of main focus is with the kids, but then sharing that kind of space with them to go inside, you know, and to connect that way through the pūoro, because it's quite powerful and emotive sounds, So I might be going on a bit too much here, but anyway, yeah.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful, Jerome, because obviously it's been wonderful seeing you do that journey, sharing it, having it available online. Very generous to do that, especially with the healing capacity, which is what a lot of our people need. I would like to move it over to you now, Maisey, and then I'd like to wrap our kōrero up with you, Ngahiwi. But first of all, I'd just like to say congratulations. You know, like you've won a number of awards in music. You've toured extensively, and you know, you're a finalist in the APRA Silver Scrolls with Hiwa I Te Rangi, written with Ray and Chris Shetlin, and Tūranga Waiwai, written with Tīpene and Troy and Tenei, and also a finalist in the Maioha Award with Waiti Waita, written with Seth Hapu. We know that many collaborations would have also occurred at Hotahohepa. Can you please share with us how you collaborate in composition?
Well, thank you for that. I always say, though, you know, those words have already been uttered from our, you know, from the atua to the tipuna, from tipuna to our tohunga, and from our tohunga down into, you know, these beautiful puka puka, or these beautiful kōrero tuku iho that have come back with our reo, It's the whole world. It's all come back, and my job is just to whakarapo potungia ki roto I te tahi waiata. Just to put it into waiata, put that waiata into the kete o mātauranga from a puoro perspective, from a waiata perspective, from a kaitito perspective, to help support this beautiful kōrero that's coming back. I mean, for hiwa I te rangi, the album is called Ngā Mato Te Ari Ki Tāwhi Mātea, and I first heard the kōrero from Rangi Mātaimua a few years ago. And ka toko ake te rā the seed was sown then, what to do to write a wata pertaining to each whetū, because they have a story about our environment, and when I first heard that kōrero, ka rongo tōku wairua, I felt it in my bones, because aha koe te puake I roto I te kohanga reo, te kurukaipapa. It wasn't until I was an adult that I had heard this kōrero. So during lockdown, was a good time to just noho puku and collaborate first with wēnei kōrero through the puka puka, through listening to Rangi's kōrero about the stars, and trying to also remember experiences that could, like for Te Puanuku Te Puarangi, the kō come out with haka down the coast, and that's why that's got that rhythm in there with the kō. And then Hiwa Te Rangi, she's the youngest e ai ki ngā kōrero a Rangi, she's the youngest of the stars, and she's our wishing star. We send our wishes up to Hiwa, and she's the youngest. So I thought, wow, it'd be amazing if Ray could, he's the youngest of the producers, if he could karangahia te hunga taiohi ngā rangatahi with his beats. The styles for every song was so much bigger than my own style. It's so much more because the atuas and their stars. So you have to go to those ones that can bring out the atua and the stars. I had to sort of just leave my style behind, and I'm going to ask these amazing other producers to come in and bring these voices of the stars and atua to life. For Hiwa Te Rangi, I just remember having a read of this puka puka about Matariki, and there's this beautiful karakia in there, te hiwa. And I just love the kaupapa of it, feeling like a blessing and a wish at the same time to, for prosperity, growth, health, development, those words sort of jumped out and I could hear it straight away. Ko hiwa nui, ko hiwa. And that's my wish, for the same wish that's in that karakia. It was that collaboration, like really wānanga, deep, noho puku, and just trying to put it into a song form. And Tūranga Waiwai, well, that waiata came from a hip-hop artist. And actually a few years before that, I remember Tipene saying, I was part of a panel. There was a few of us. You might have been there too. And Tipene, he asked if I would ever be on a hip-hop track. And I said, well, the kaupapa was right then. I get this kaupapa, and it's about going on to the marae. He's calling everyone in and trying to take them through the steps, and there was one step missing. So I said, I'll do the little, karanga bit at the top. And So, the kaupapa for that was definitely what, grabbed my attention for that. I'm down for that. And I'm so happy for Tipene, because I haven't heard anybody rap about that. Haven't heard anybody rap about Tūranga Waiwai, about Pepea, about Māori, like Wahine. So I'm so grateful for him bringing that for our rangatahi, for our Māori men, and for us wahine to hear about someone rapping about our essence. That's pretty cool. Much aroha to him and Troy. For Waiti Waita, another wata pertaining to our whetū that hono us to the waters, to the Moana. That's me. I was brought up by the Moana, and also in the rivers, Waiti Waita. For that was definitely a collaboration with our waterfall. I just went and had a bit of a noho puku with the waterfall, and how the water trickles down. And that's how that's what it was all based on. That's what it sounds like to me. What the waterfall sounded like. So the whole wata was sort of just based around what it's like to me. So that's our collab, me and Te Wairere here. And then, of course, sending the vocals, recording the vocals here, my little setup. I had bought this gear like 3 years ago. Finally got to use it during lockdown. Had to sharpen up on how to use Pro Tools, all that kind of stuff. And then was able to send it through to the boys to produce. So, yeah, sort of when I was singing it, I could kind of see who I'd like to hand it over to bring those stars and gods through in the music. I mean, Seth, he's from Wata, he's Wanganui. So I sent it to Seth to bring that out, that beautiful, the water. Poitukawa was, our star pertaining to our wamate, so she needed some special treatment. That's why I wanted 2 wheeled style orchestra through Jerome Mayo and Horo with our Puoro, the first voice. So to give her that. And I think Hiwa and Pohutukawa, because they're the 2 stars that kind of didn't get spoken about for a while. I wanted them to. They're the longest songs. I remember Ray saying, "Hey, it's too long. It's too long." I said, leave it. Yeah, give her a long shine because she's, haven't been spoken about for so long. So, I just trusted. I just trusted they were the right people, and they were the right people to bring out, our stars and our atua. And I knew, because I don't do that. I don't know how to do it for all that what they can do. So ko rātou ngā tohunga I roto tērā ao, so I just left it up to them and trusted they could do it.
What a wonderful, wonderful project, and fully collaborated, weaving in with each other's skills and talents and Māori and Wairua. And like one thing that's always struck me about you is that you've always, all of you actually, is that you're always quite led by your hoa Wairua and, taking everything in, and your intuition, tipuna. Yeah, that sounds so beautiful. Congratulations, e hoa. I mean, especially in the, like the Apra Silver Scroll part, mai o ha, beautiful, but Apra Silver Scroll, I mean, and beautiful to see you and Troy to support Tipene. I thought, I saw that at a Waiata Māori Music Awards 2 years ago, and I thought, oh, hika, there's Tipene, and they're the backups. And I was going, okay, ka pai you, Tipene, ka pai. And and that's a testament to your own humility and support for musicians and composers coming through. So congratulations, e hoa. It's very beautiful to see. And I would like to bring it back to our kōrero, back to you, Ngahiwi. Thank you, Maisey. Thank you, Jerome. In that you certainly have been, and I've sat alongside you as well, innovative in all the boards, the committees, the organisations that you've worked with. And, Mahuru Māori is here now, and as Chief Executive of Te Taurawhiri Te Reo Māori, carrying Māori language to all in Aotearoa, particularly with your innovation with the parades and the Māori language moment. Tell us what you are up to with this kaupapa and what your own aspirations for future compositions are. Kaya koe te wā, Ngahiwi.
One of the things that I'm incredibly aware of is that I don't know everything. And I remember leaving university thinking that I did. And it's probably not wrong for me to say that my education started when I got back to Ngāti Porou. It was, I didn't expect to be anything special when I went home. I just wanted to go home and do what I promised my grandfather I'd do, which was to help out. But what happened was I ended up with some of my wonderful aunties, including Kate Walker, and my uncles like Stone Wano, Pohatu Wano, and Koro Jews. And being around them, and I can remember this funny episode, you know, because we had been so politically staunch when I was at university. We had rejected Christianity, right? And we'd gone back to, you know, Wairua Māori Tūturu because we had been influenced by Ruka Broughton. And to tell you the truth, I was a pretty terrible Christian anyway. I mean, I went to chapel because I had to, because you get caned if you weren't there. So I'd had enough of pretending, you know, for 5 years. And so when I get to university and there's this alternative, all of a sudden I'm starting to understand why the old people were talking about when they were talking about Wairua and talking about ancestors. And so when I went home, I was on the marae in Aotearoa, and one of my uncles did the whai kōrero, and then afterwards I sat down with him and I said to him, "Hey uncle, you know, when you started off, you said whakatūau I te arawhata ki te atua." I said, "So you prayed to the Christian God, and then later on in your whai kōrero, you kept on doing mihi to Tangaroa and to Tāne and all this." And I said to him, "How do you reconcile that?" And he looked at me and he said, "What's that, boy?" And so I was stupid enough to ask the question again. He went, "What's that, boy?" And the reality for them is that Wairua is Wairua. It doesn't matter where it comes from. It's Wairua. And then I started learning about listening to other people, because, you know, I like to talk. And but I learned there when to shut up and when to listen, and know who to listen to. And sometimes you listen to the person who's not the most obvious person to listen to. But the other thing I learned was that the things I didn't know, you know, and I remember being 30 and thinking, oh, you know, I don't know as much as I thought I did when I was in my 20s, and then hitting 40 and going, oh, I still don't know everything, and then turning 50 and thinking, yeah, I don't know everything, but I know people who know stuff. And that's what collaboration is about for me. And everything that I do is a collaboration, whether it's music, you know, when we're playing with the All-Stars, everything is about trusting your partners to bring something, you know, to the waiata, to the song, to the performance, and having absolute trust in them to do that. So when I go out and play now, you know, it's not so much about being the leader, it's about being part of a band and really enjoying the music that you're making and the wairua that you bring to that. And at the Te Tautawhiri, it's the same thing. You know, I approach it like a band. I go in, I'm aware of how tired the work can make people, because it's really hard stuff. Everybody that works in the Tautawhiri is there because they love te reo. And they wear that on their hearts on their sleeves. And so it's really easy for that heart to be damaged because it's exposed. And so I'm big on oranga. I watch out for my people all the time. Over the lockdown, I've been, you know, Zooming and Microsoft Teaming people, because I just want to see how they are. And on Friday, I'm going to make the biggest batch of fried bread I've ever made and then go and deliver it, you know, because I want them to be fine. And so it's all about, you don't hire stars, right? It's just like when Maisey played at the first Pau 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 at Pipiti, and then came in and was really surprised that she was the lead act. I cracked up, and then JJ turned up earlier on and said apologetically, "Oh, is this where Pau 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 is?" And you know, half the staff were wanting to jump on him and get his autograph. And you know, it's you don't hire a star to throw a blanket over them. You hire a star so they can shine. That's what you do. And if they shine brighter than you, cool. You know, that's just the way it is. And you enjoy that. You don't get jealous of it. You enjoy it. And it's the same at Te Tautawhiri. I've had a Samoan woman, Christina Munson, who is Paola Munson's partner, just the most brilliant communications brain I've ever come across. And when she turned up in 2018-19, we had Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori, you know, going reasonably well, but she's taking it to another level. And then last year, she was the brains behind the Māori language moment that brought in 1 million people to celebrate that kaupapa, the first time ever 1 million people have celebrated an Indigenous language, and has won, I think, close to 20 awards from around the world because of that achievement. And I wanted it to be a haka, right? Because I'm a stupid man who thinks that the haka is the be-all and end-all. And, and I remember when she came back after testing it, because that's a big thing too, is marketing for us is really big, understanding whether people want something or anyway, she came back and she changed my haka into this Māori language moment. And I said to her, "Tuhine, what happened to the haka, And she said to me in her get out of my lane, bro voice, the nicest one of those that she's got, bro, if you only do the haka, then you exclude people because not everybody likes to do the haka, And so it's do a karakia, read a book, sing a song, do a haka if you want to. Anything Māori, do it. Te reo Māori, do it. And then register." And then I watched, because we started advertising a week out, and I watched that counter start to zoom up. And so that by the Monday of the week of Te Reo Māori, we had just over 1 million people registered for the Māori language moment. This year, we're trying to set a Guinness World Record for people celebrating an Indigenous language at one time. And that's Christine's idea again. We'll do things like we'll launch a new te reo modelling tool that we've got, which agencies will use. And all modelling tools, data modelling tools, are built on assumptions. So you assume, for instance, one of the assumptions you might make is that government funding is going to be static for te reo Māori for the next 2 or 3 years. You assume, for instance, another one might be there'll be a growth in people who value te reo Māori. So all of these things you feed into that program, that's what it considers, and that's how it builds its forecast. And so we've done that, which we'll launch in Māori Language Week. There are a number of events that have been knocked over too, as well. The launch of the new Anthems album, the physical launch, that's gone by the wayside because of lockdown. The Kei Te Aha Ngāti Pro conference, the conference, that's gone. So I was looking for an excuse to go home so I could check up on our whare and make sure it hasn't fallen down, but I won't be doing that. And of course, the Te Reo Ki Tua in Kahungunu has also, gone by the wayside as well. But look, everything will move online. We had planned to move everything online. And of course, it is Mahuru Māori for those who want to speak Māori for the whole month. And it's something that I register for and then have to do interviews in English. But, everything I do at the Tautawhiri probably goes back to what I learned as the band leader for Aotearoa, and look, I was making it up as I was going. I knew nothing about people, how to manage egos and things like that. And it really got me down at times. I found it really hard because I was the only one who didn't, drink or do drugs, and I was trying to stop people who did that habitually from doing it while we were performing. And it was really, really hard because it was so ingrained into the culture, into the music culture of New Zealand bands at the time. You're talking about the mid-'80s through to the early 90s and stuff. And I found that the most difficult thing, but I also learned a lot from it. And because I approached it a bit like a mission, Nobody had appointed me to save the Māori people. I appointed myself. And so I was running around with a bit of a God complex as well. And I think I just needed somebody to stop me and slap me and wake me up, But, those things, all of those things got me really, really interested in how to manage people. And not so much in terms of, manipulating them, but in terms of supporting and understanding. Because I think people can pick a manipulator up from a mile away. And my thing, when my managers come to see me and they say, I've got a problem with such and such. I say, okay, what are you doing? And they tell me, and I say, okay, so what support have you put in place? And they look at me quizzically going, I'm not putting any support in, I want to growl them. I say, well, is that going to work? Do you like being growled? No. Well, what support have you put in place? And so it's those types of things. And the sooner I think we learn to be kinder to those that we work with, the better. Because people don't make mistakes because they love to make mistakes. Often, most mistakes are made accidentally. People make a mistake because they missed this or they missed that or didn't consider this or that. So, very much my biggest collaboration, the collaboration of my life has been at Te Tautawhiri. And that's not to disrespect what's happened in my musical life as well, because what I'm doing at Te Tauru Whiri is what I learned from being in a band, because, that's life really. People often say to me, musicians, there's so much ego. And I said, yeah, there is. But that's because it's so intensely personal. What you're putting out there is going to be judged by everybody, and you're worried. You're anxious that people aren't going to like it, and it becomes part of, I suppose, your approval, the approval of who you are, is putting your music out there and then having people like it. And I learned that if there's too much of you in a collaboration, then people don't see themselves in it. And so that's become a big thing. But, Te Tauru Whiri at the moment for me is like a band. It's about collaborating. It's about you bringing your mana, your knowledge, what you know to the table, and then me giving you the space to structure stuff.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Ehua, for that. And it's so true. Collaborating, I suppose when you are in a position of leadership, it's about ensuring that those around you work as a whānau, work as a team, and they feel valued for their input, like you're saying with collaboration. Well, I would like to deeply thank you all for coming today to share about your experiences in your time at boarding school. It's something that's close to all our hearts, and how those experiences have actually influenced us as, writers, musicians, performers, leaders, and maybe just helped us along the way as more balanced and good people. No one's perfect, of course, but I have the most respect for what all of you are doing, and it's been a real pleasure to hear you share of your history with us all today, and I'm very thankful for it. And most importantly, I have a lot of aroha for all of you as well, and I look forward to us having more kōrero, more collaborations, supporting each other and supporting those that are coming through. I look forward to seeing some of your new compositions, Ngahiwi. I know you've got them happening. I know you've got lots happening in there, and in particular to various kaupapa that have been happening in the news. You've got those waiata ready to go, ready to be recorded in the current day. To you, Maisey, with, congratulations once again. What a beautiful kaupapa to be acknowledged for, with our whetū, with our, our tipuna in those realms, and also educating what Rangi Mātāmua has started, educating our wider whānau even more so through those waiata, and obviously also collaborating with some really good people, awesome people, and opening up whakawhānui, that creativity even more in your own art form. And, and to yourself, Jerome, for, the beautiful continuous work with healing, with taonga pūoro, particularly for our taiohi rangatahi and our wider communities, which, has to be something that's really special to the heart, when it's about uplifting our own people first and foremost, and then the wider te ao whānui, just so, so beautiful. So thank you all for speaking today with SOUNZ about your journey from boarding school up until now in your musical careers. Ngā mihi tonu kia koutou katoa, irini I tēnei kaupapa. Kai a koe te karakia whakamutunga Ngahiwi?
Ahoia no kia tau kia tāta katoa, me rangi Māori o rangi nui e tūnei, o whapatua nuku ki tako konei, kia rautako ai o tāne ki raro, nau mai te pō tēnei te ao, whano, haramai te toki, haumi e, hui e, tai ki.
Tai ki.
This podcast was produced and presented for SOUNZ Centre for New Zealand Music, Toi Te Ara Puoru, by me, Toni Huata. The sound engineer is Phil Brownlee, and production assistants from Roger Smith, Nina Lesperance, and Ngahiwi Apanui&nbsp. Thanks to my guests, Maisey Rika, Ngahiwi Apanui and Jerome Kavanagh, for their generous kōrero, and thank you for listening. For more about this and other SOUNZ podcasts or information about the music of Aotearoa New Zealand, go to the SOUNZ website, sounz.org.nz. That's SOUNZ. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Toi te ara puoru, SOUNZ.